Team Oddball.
Hello, this is Mator, the creator of the Ghost Froom, and this is the second part of my explanation for the Ghost Froom. In this part, I will be explaining the Ghost Shroom, which is the first step in making the Ghost Froom. I skipped the Ghost Shroom in my main video because it would have taken too much time, but here you'll be able to see the entire process for making it on Blood Gulch. Anywho, with that out of the way, let's get started. First off, the Ghost Shroom is only possible at red base. This is because the base's models are actually different. Though they look really similar, you can note that the walls of each base actually have a different texture. In addition to this difference, the bases actually have different geometry, as in their collision model, or actually how they're shaped, is different. This makes it so that making the Ghost Shroom, due to some slight geometrical difference, is not possible at blue base. So, we do it at red base. Now, the first step to making the Ghost Shroom is to get a ghost on top of the base. Doing this is fairly simple, and there are many methods to do so. I'm just going to use the hill method, which is where I drive at this hill in front of the base and hold space. Now what spacebar does is, it seems almost as if it was supposed to slow the ghost down, like a brake, but it more so moves the front of the ghost upwards. In other Halos, it would probably boost the ghost, but in Halo 1, again, it was much more primitive. Just move the front of the ghost upwards. Anywho, once on top of the base, you do the second step, which is to make a ghost seat shark. Now, what's a ghost seat shark? That's a weird name. Well, a ghost seat shark is where you get the ghost seat inside of the ceiling of the base. The way you do this is you drape the seat over the edge of the hole and then ram it with a banshee. And what this essentially does is it splits the ghost so that the seat is underneath the ceiling while the rest of the ghost is above the ceiling. Now, you might be asking, well, how in the world is this possible? This defies physics. Well, it does. But the reason it does is because Halo's collision detection system isn't very good with sharp edges. For instance, take the edge of this portal. It's a very, very sharp edge. Now if I drive the ghost's wing at it, instead of stopping the ghost, the wing just goes right into it. The reason that this happens is because Halo creates solidity for vehicles through the existence of certain spheres. I'll just call them physics spheres here. And in each vehicle, there are a certain number of spheres. In the Ghost, there is one in each wing, one in the front of the hull, one in the middle, and one in the seat. Now, these spheres don't completely merge with each other. They're only of a certain size, like about the size of the seat, and about the same size in each part of the hull and in each wing. And these spheres are what make the Ghost solid. They're what prevents the Ghost from falling through the ground or driving through rocks, other things like that. However, there are spaces between these spheres, and it is in these spaces that you can drive the Ghost into things. Now, in reality, driving the Ghost like this would probably separate the wing from the Ghost. However, because Halo isn't programmed to separate the collision model in any way, it doesn't do so. Instead, it splits it still, but it keeps it together at the same time. Now, the Ghost has 6 major breakpoints created by the spheres inside of it. One in each wing, one here at the seat, one in the middle, and 2 diagonally. Now, with the seat shark, we're just going to use the seat breakpoint with the edge of the hole of the base, like so. I'm just going to drape the ghost seat over the edge, and then I'm going to use the banshee to ram it into the ceiling of the base, like so. Pretty simple. Now, this is a ghost seat shark. You might be wondering, well, that's a really funny name. How did you come up with that? Well, the name seat shark came about, or more specifically, shark came about, because of another stunt. A stunt which was done on the map Ghost. I'm one of the only people who probably says that name right. Ghost means fear of bridges. The map is only on Halo PC. Essentially, there was a stunt discovered there, which involved driving the Banshee into the edge of the rail, such that the top part of the Banshee, kind of the canopy, if you will, gets pierced, sort of in the same way that you do with the Ghost Seat Shark. This makes it so that only a small part of the tip of the nose of the Banshee is visible from above. The Banshee can then drive around, restricted by the ground, and looks, in many ways, similar to a shark. This is how the name Banshee Shark came about. From there, the name Shark just got attributed to any vehicle which you can put inside the ground and drive. It just so happened to be how things worked out. The name was cool, people liked it, so there you go. That's how we got Ghost Seat Sharks. Pretty crazy. Anywho, once you have the Ghost Seat Shark, the next step involves pushing it past the doorway. Pushing it past the doorway, in turn, allows it to sink down from its seat break point to its middle break point, from a seat shark to a ghost half shroom. However, this is not a simple process. It doesn't just do it. There's many complex physical reasons behind why this actually works, how it's possible. There are two phenomena in particular: sinking, which I already mentioned, and de-rendering. De-rendering is pretty interesting. It occurs on two levels, visual and collision. With the visual level, it occurs in two ways: due to distance, or due to the game actually thinking something is not visible to you. Take, for instance, the inside of this cave. Right now, the game thinks I can't see inside of this cave. For that reason, to preserve resources, to not be so extremely resource intensive, it doesn't render the inside of that cave. Now, what is rendering? If you don't already know what rendering is, it's essentially where the game makes something visible. Essentially, this is a 3D environment, and it's made up of polygons or triangles. And every single triangle, it has a texture and has an orientation, and it's essentially generated by your computer's 3D graphics engine. However, because your graphics engine has only a finite amount of memory and processing power, you can't render an infinite number of triangles and polygons every second. You can't do it. So games have rendering engines, which selectively render only certain parts of levels or objects based upon whether it thinks it's visible to the player or not. So, in the case of this ghost, there's a node or a marker inside of this top part of the ghost, which the game refers to when it decides whether or not the ghost is visible to the player, when it then decides whether or not to render the visual model of the ghost. Now, if I go down here, that marker is above the base, and if I move forward, boom, ghost becomes invisible. This is because the game thinks I can't see the ghost, so it doesn't render the visual model of the ghost. Pretty simple. However, the collision level is a bit more difficult to understand. Essentially, there's a node associated with each physics sphere, as mentioned before, in the ghost. Whenever one of these nodes passes outside of the map, that collision, that physics sphere, de-renders. It stops functioning. It kind of disappears temporarily. This is because the game doesn't want to have to calculate physics interactions for objects which are outside of the map's geometry. This is just a standard property of how 3D gaming engines work. I don't think it was even purposely put in Halo. It was just kind of there, kind of base level in the 3D engine. So basically, whenever a vehicle or another object with a collision model passes outside of the map's geometry, the game does not render its collision model, making it non-solid. So, with the ghost, the seat will pass outside of the map when I ram the ghost forward. Or, not all of the seat, but the node in the seat. This will then make the seat non-solid. That's important. Anywho, then we have sinking. And sinking is the phenomenon where a vehicle sinks from one breakpoint to the next. This essentially involves pushing or pulling the ghost past a certain critical point, past which the ghost will stop resisting the transition from one breakpoint to the next, and will just sink down all the way from one to the next. This primarily occurs with ghosts. We haven't really seen it very much with other vehicles. In this case, the sinking is initiated by this slant right here, which you can see in front of the doorway. Essentially, as I move the ghost forward, the ghost seat will pull down on the slant, and it will eventually pull the ghost downward and into that half shroom. Now, half shroom. There's another funny name. Shroom comes about because of the aesthetic features of it. I'll show you that in a little bit. half. Why is it a half shroom? Why make that distinction? Well, the reason why we would call it a half shroom is because once we pass the doorway here and it becomes a shroom, the seat will pass back into the map and become solid again. This makes it a half shroom because a full shroom, the seat would not be inside the map at all. The whole bottom half of the ghost is outside of the map and non-solid. A half shroom, on the other hand, some certain part of the ghost is actually still inside of the map, from underneath, bottom half. This makes it solid and thus restricts the movement of the ghost. And this is why we call it a half shroom. Anywho, I'm just going to ram this ghost into this doorway, and as I'm ramming it, the seat will be becoming solid and non-solid at different times. And eventually, as you just saw there, it will be solid inside of the slant before I ram. Normally it only becomes solid after I ram, which prevents it from coming out of the ground, but doesn't allow it to move forward. But one of those times, it should become solid at the right time, allow the ghost to pass forward and sink down into the half shroom. Now, once in the half shroom, you can hopefully see over here, maybe not. Oh, yeah, there you go. Ghost seat. So the ghost seat, as you can tell, is underneath. Now, if I were to flip this ghost, that seat will become solid and kind of serve as an anchor. It keeps it from flipping out. This, again, is what makes it a half shroom. Now, because the seat is solid, the ghost is limited in its movement. I can't just push it over here, for instance. It becomes stopped. The reason this happens is because, again, the seat becomes solid and keeps it from passing this wall, or this wall, or this wall, or whatever other walls are around here. Now, this is no good. We don't want the ghost to be on top of the base. We want to get it off the base, to make it a full shroom. So, we have to do a process similar to what we did before, cause the de-rendering of the seat so that we can push it off of the base. But before I do that, I'm just going to point out why this was called a shroom. The name was invented by a stunner named Cal, who made a lot of ghost shrooms in his day. Essentially, if you look at this ghost, it's a little bit easier to see when it's in the ground, but it has kind of aesthetic features similar to a mushroom. You can see kind of the wings would be the cap, and the bottom part with the kind of the gray things, those could be kind of the gills of the mushroom, and then the main body of the ghost could be like the root and the stem of the mushroom. It's kind of a stretch, but hey, gotta come up with some kind of interesting names. Makes it memorable. Anywho, I'm now just going to push this ghost to the left of this big pillar. Now, because of the geometry of the base, this step only works to the left of this particular big pillar. Again, this is because the base isn't the same everywhere. It may look very similar, but slight differences make it so that this step only works here. Now, when I'm pushing it to the left of this particular big pillar, what it will be doing is it will be pushing the seat of the ghost into this corner, right over here. And eventually, what will happen is the node that gives the seat its solidity, that renders the physics sphere, which gives the seat solidity, will pass outside of the map. And when the node passes outside of the map, seat becomes non-solid, and the ghost can move forward. So I'm just going to do that here. Ta-da! You see how it kind of slid forward a bit there. That means that I just got past, or through, the seat. I got the seat past the corner. Anywho, I'm now going to do the final step. The final step involves pushing the ghost off of the base, which might seem simple, but it's actually quite complicated. This is actually the hardest step. This is the part that most people mess up. So for this step, there are a few things which make it difficult. First off, the ghost can't have too much speed, because if it has too much speed when it slides down the wall, then when it falls and slides into the ground, it'll oscillate, almost like a pendulum, and come entirely out of the ground again. This is because it is a full shroom now. The bottom half is no longer solid, so it has freedom of movement, and it'll just slide right out of the ground, because the ground can't stop it. It's not solid. As if that wasn't enough, I have to push it down a specific section of wall. Only this section of wall is really solid, per se. This section, for some reason, isn't. I don't know exactly why this is, but essentially this section of wall, the ghost will slide down. This section of wall, the ghost will just pass right through it. So you have to push it down this section of wall. Can't push it too fast. And you have to push it so that the wings remain parallel with the ground. For if they're not parallel with the ground, if they were, say, perpendicular, then the wing will collide with the ground and it'll make the ghost come out of the wall and into the ground in the form of a sea shark instead of a shroom. And we don't want that. So, yeah. Practice makes perfect, and after a long time of making ghost shrooms, I'm able to get this pretty much every time. But it can be pretty difficult for beginners. So I'm just going to push on the side there, slides down the wall, and there we go. That's our ghost shroom. You can see maybe a little bit better now why they call it a ghost shroom. But anyways, this is the end of this part. We'll see you in the next time.